Hello, and a big welcome to the Strategy Remix. Thank you for joining this LinkedIn Live session. I am your host and moderator, Samar Faruqi. We will get started in a few moments. Now remember, this is live social audio. So if you have a question or want to make a comment, please use the raise hand button so I can promote you to the virtual stage. This event will be recorded and made available on social media channels. Please note that any opinions expressed by myself, Samar Faruqi, are wholly my own and do not represent or imply any official statement from my employer unless explicitly stated as such. All right, I can see people now logging in. Let's get started. So, welcome to the 16th episode of the Strategy Remix, and what a journey we've had. Thank you for your kind support. Now, if you are a regular on this podcast, you will recall that the last two episodes have focused on generative AI from a strategic point of view. What is it? What does it mean for business? Well, that's well covered ground now. So I'm very excited today to take the conversation into practical reality and move beyond the hype. So let's get into the topic from the point of view of the entrepreneur's journey. That is moving from an idea to commercial reality, working and deployed in business today. So with that, my guest today is a leading tech entrepreneur who is working and delivering enterprise-scale generative AI solutions to a growing list of Fortune 1000 companies. I'm honored to introduce Dan Malin, founder and CEO of Lucy.AI. Dan, welcome to the Strategy Remix.
Hello, Samar. Great to be here. Thank you for having me, and I look forward just to sharing what we're doing, but also what is the art of the possible as implemented today.
Absolutely, Dan. Great to have you with us, and to explore what you're doing in this space of generative AI with Lucy, and also touch upon how you're working with SAP IO. Which is really exciting for me as well. They have a personal stake in this in terms of how our organizations are working together. So a quick reminder to the audience as we get into this, if you have any questions or comments, please do raise your hand. Give me a thumbs up. You can hear us A-OK. That would be great to confirm any audio issues. If not, let's get straight into it. All right. So Dan, so let's start understanding your perspective first in terms of whom you are for the audience. So I'd like you to just give yourself a quick introduction in terms of your background and your business and where you are today.
Certainly. Well, so short answer is I'm a serial entrepreneur, and I've been involved in multiple entrepreneurial ventures over the past 20 plus years. And as we finished up our last venture and sold it, a liquidity event, which is always the goal of an entrepreneur, we started thinking about what we wanted to do next. And so I have a couple of business partners, and we've been doing this together for, again, that same kind of time horizon. And so we were looking at the advent of AI and what was coming out and becoming available. And this is pre-generative, right? So this is 6-7 years ago. And what we had this deep understanding of was corporate knowledge and data and all of the data that existed inside of an organization. And so we were looking at, what can we do with that? And so the basis of Lucy does not require generative to work. Although what we've done, and I'll share a little bit of the timeline, is implement generative as an additive kind of component that does some really, really cool stuff on behalf of our clients. So Lucy is an enterprise grade knowledge management tool that connects to all of the data repositories inside of an organization. And so what that looks like is if you're running, we'll call it the Microsoft suite, Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, but can be Box, Dropbox. Throughout the SAP suite, we're connected to Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, SuccessFactors, Industry Cloud. So wherever your content or data resides, Lucy reads, watches, and listens to all of that. She also connects to third-party data sources. So if you connect to, Business Intelligence Insider, eMarketer, Mintel, Kantar, whatever sources you may be purchasing, and then also systems and dashboards. And through a natural language, interaction, you just ask Lucy a question and she brings back the answer from all of that data. We had early in 2000, 2022, February, actually SAP as a client came to us and said, we'd like to put Lucy in a virtual trade show lobby during COVID. And so we had an Ask Lucy kiosk, and you could just ask questions about the mid-market tool set, about the trade show, about anything you wanted. And through Generative, Lucy took the answer she found and wrote the answer for that kiosk. And so that was our first use of Generative. And I kind of lay out that timeline because it was a full year before most people even knew what Generative was. And that was already a component of Lucy. The next piece became, how do we do that if we want to ask questions in Teams or Slack or Zoom chat or anywhere your company has a chat environment? And so we allow people to just ask questions. You just mention Lucy and she responds to the group, or you can interact directly with her. And so it's been a really, really cool journey from, enabling corporate data to enabling it anywhere that you are in this kind of remote Team Slack texting environment.
Right, Dan. So, as you describe it, your idea, and just stepping back through what you've explained, right, as a serial entrepreneur, one day you were sitting there having concluded this deal, and no doubt that was successful, your previous venture, and now you're sitting, what's next, right? And how did you identify this white space in knowledge management specifically? And also, what is the difference between old knowledge management, and I say old knowledge management because, I've been around the industry for 25, 30 years as well. And, that was something that I did at university, expert systems and knowledge management was one of the first sort of things. But how different is it today than what you have proposed?
Well, historically, I go back, I implemented my first knowledge management system inside, I worked at 3M. So, obviously big business back in the 90s. And so, it was text search. It was the biggest thing historically, what you've had to do is put things into the knowledge management system. You had to tag or create tagging to be able to retrieve it. And it's something that was always limited by, we'll call it the librarian function, right? Somebody had to do stuff to every document to make it worthy or valuable or mechanism to bring it forward. With the advent of AI, and think about inside your organizations, how many PowerPoint slides or slide decks are created every day. And in most, Fortune 1000s, that's measured in hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands. And then you think about it, how many slides are in each deck. And so what Lucy does is she doesn't tag the deck, she tags each slide. And so if it's a 100-slide deck, each slide is tagged differently, which allows her to retrieve the slide as opposed to allowing her just to bring back a list of files. And if you bring back a list of files, and if you're lucky enough only to get 10 files, and if you're lucky enough for each of those files to only be 10 pages long, you have 100 pages of reading to determine if you have your answer. But if Lucy brings you the 10 slides, displays the 10 slides from the 10 different decks, and says, here's your answer, and then writes a generative response that's a summary of those 10 slides. That is the differentiator between yesterday's knowledge management and what we can do today.
Yeah, that's really, really well put, right? So if I kind of rephrase that in my own terms, perhaps 5, 10 years ago when we're using intranets perhaps, or trying to search for queries on a corporate network, we would rely on basically an indexing engine, right? So as you say, a document had to be created and it had to be typically have the tags added in that by the author or by someone dedicated to that task, which is not often the case, and then put in some sort of repository, SharePoint or otherwise, and then we would search those indexes and hope for a hit, right? And then you would have this list, just like a search engine, which would then give you those documents, but then also then you have to go into those documents individually and then try to extract that value. And how many times have we spent days and days scrolling through endless PDFs or PowerPoints to find that information? But as you said, with Lucy, you've been able to master this technique by almost at a slide-by-slide level. Not almost, but actually, you are tagging each of those individual pages, right? So can you explain what sort of value does the user now experience from their perspective when they're doing that same search they may have done 5 years ago? How different does that feel now, and what is the response time?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's so much into what we're saying here, right? So the first answer is, has anybody ever gone to their own laptop in search of a file that you created and you can't find it? Because we all have. And so all of a sudden we're opening this up in a secure mechanism too. I want to be clear. You don't just have access to the whole corporate, you have access to the repositories that you're allowed to see inside your organization. So different people's queries have slightly different answers based on what they're authorized or what's available for them to see. But we use kind of this iceberg analogy. You have an idea of what might be available, and it's just the tip of the iceberg inside an organization. And so one of the coolest things that happens is I go search for a deck or a slide or some content or information by asking a question that I saw somebody present 2 months ago. And I find that no problem, but I also find 2 other pieces of content, and they're not all PowerPoint slides. It could be a PDF, it could be a video. And in a video, we queue up the second in the video, an hour-long video, we queue up minute 69 and 20 seconds when the answer comes. So similar kind of thought process. But I also find a third-party data source that validates what the point I'm trying to make. And I find a dashboard that is tracking how the corporation thinks about it. And so by having that holistic view in seconds, and we're sub 5 seconds, usually 2 or 3 seconds to get to an answer, which is just mind-boggling because you couldn't have done this with 10 people or 100 people in a year looking through all the data in the old world models. And so, and what the other piece is, we know people in companies, and our clients' own data is telling us that people spend 20 or 25% of their time, which ends up being like 2 to hours a day looking for stuff. So people are spending time, knowledge workers spend time just looking for information. And there's no value add in the process of looking for information. The value add is in using the data and information I find to make a better decision faster, right? Or not regenerating the same data that we already have in some other place. And, we've had talks about, on your previous events, we talk about augmented intelligence, not artificial intelligence. So this isn't about Lucy making a rote decision against data. This is about providing knowledge workers with the data they need to make the decisions they should make, and understanding what the whole landscape looks like in seconds and being able to, again, make a better decision faster.
Right, yeah, and this is the promise of expert systems or knowledge management, right? Is certainly as we were sold it back in the day when I was an undergraduate, that information available at speed would help make better decisions. And this is a competitive advantage, of course, right? And starting with the very first databases, and that ability to execute at speed to make better decisions has only accelerated, right, in terms of its scope. And what's very interesting about what you said, and I think I'd love to reinforce that for the audience, is it's not just PowerPoint or text documents. You're able to ingest, in technical word, with Lucy, other content, right? So video and audio and other such sources. And this creates that kind of multimedia delivery. So when you went through that process, was there any sort of major technical hurdle in development to be able to do this? I think because logically, many of us could understand, from coming from traditional IT, the process of indexing, that's something that we know very well. But when it comes to actually ingesting content and creating a technology to do that, how did you go about that? And was there any specific technical challenge that you found in that process?
The crazy answer is, of course, there were all kinds of technical challenges, right? And we've been at this for quite some time. The most important components of this are first automating that connection with the data sources. And so what that takes out is I don't need to when you're indexing, when you're crawling a content, you're constantly interacting with the server saying, has anything changed? Has anything changed? What's changed? Let's look at it. Let's do something. And so we have a much more proactive connection where the connection tells us if something has changed. And so we don't occupy any server time that isn't necessary. We don't occupy any resources inside the company to be doing the indexing component. We just say, hey, let us know when something's changed, add, changed, or deleted. You just remove something from SharePoint, it's removed from Lucy. And so we have that process all automated, which is a huge effort because we're connected to hundreds of different things, right? And so each one of those is in its own fashion a connection. And now our capability to connect to new things is a core capability of what we do. The second thing is we don't do one thing when ingesting. We'll call it N things. And N things are different based on what type of file it is or what type of information it is. And so the example is inside a PowerPoint, there might be a picture or a graph or something. And so we have to look at what that is and be able to interpret that. We have to look for, are there brands? Are there words on a screen in a video? Whatever it is. And all of those components become part of what the index is. And so it's funny because I talk to technical people all the time. They go, oh, I see how you do that. And they figured out one component of one thing that's happening. But that's not how we do it. That's just an input into what we do. And so, as I said, we do, depending on the file type, we might do 3 things or 10 things or 20 things that are all different in how we enhance or create this metadata index. The other thing we do, again, is a whole security layer that's so important to your host organizations, right? And so everything is done in a secure way. We're ISO certified. We have all our processes. We do not touch any of the data. We do not become the system of record. We don't. We have, those files still remain on the server untouched. We create a metadata index that is stored and secured, and through that we can again retrieve that information really quickly and bring it back. Again, always with access to the source system, the source file, whatever that might look like.
Right. Yeah, that's a very thorough explanation there. I think it just goes to show. I mean, the steps and challenges you had to overcome to design those. So just thinking back to the initial part of our conversation, right? So again, your entrepreneur's journey, so did you have a clear vision in mind to be able to deliver this functionality, or did you see opportunity based on a clear white space where this did not exist? Or was it that the technology is now on the horizon and you can put it together in a unique way to help customers solve this problem? Which one was it for you?
Yeah, in general, my career has been about the last version of that, which is new technology enabling competitive advantage that people are afraid of or don't understand, and we see that white space of what we could do with this new technology, and provide our clients that a competitive advantage early, and then through the life cycle of the product or service we offer.
Right. So you're right on that, riding that wave, right, as it was in terms of you're right at the top, and you can see that technology coming with your telescope or your crystal ball. But this,
Well,
yes,
Samar, when you say that, uh, we started with AI before
right.
generative. We started with generative before
Hmm.
anybody understood it. A year ahead of the cycle, and we have more coming that is innovative and driving those outcomes too, right? And so the idea is, there are just people who study the what is coming and what's available. We also discount lots of it. It's not valuable. We can't see the purpose. We don't just do anything that's new. It's not a flashing light or a shiny object. It's got to be driving competitive advantage to our clients.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, right? So yes, there's lots of futurists out there, there's lots of hype, but picking and choosing that and being able to identify that, right, is an entrepreneur's lifeblood, right? Is that something where you see the opportunity that perhaps others do not, and that there is tangible benefit there? And I think the benefit, as you've laid out for Lucy, is extremely clear. I mean, it is, as you said, it's saving time, it's delivering multiple sources of information and triangulating that with external sources as well. And all of that is not only saving labor and time, it's also effectively monetizing through better decisions the information already gathered by your organization. Would you agree with that characterization?
100%. And I use the difference of data and knowledge. So data is there's all kinds of data in an organization. The people in the organization convert the data to knowledge. They usually put it in a PowerPoint, a presentation, a white paper, a video, an audio file, and so there's so much more value of being able to extract information from the knowledge than the data. The data is a step back already. And so we're focused on knowledge more than data, though data is an input to the knowledge, and we can use the dashboards and other things to get to the data in systems. And we haven't really talked about SAP.io, and this is a really cool program that we are honored to be part of, where SAP looks for innovative new companies that that further the purpose of the SAP suite inside the organizations that you can carry, that the SAP reps then help us carry into the organizations. And so Lucy's been involved with that. And so what that does is allow us and give us technical help to do some integrations into that CX cloud, sales and service, success factors, industry cloud, all these other places, which have both data and knowledge in them, right? And so, and through that, Lucy can bring forward answers from the SAP suite, in addition to, your SharePoints and other places that you store
Yeah, no,
content.
absolutely, Dan. I'm very keen to explore that in the next section. We're just 20 minutes or so in, and keen to remind the audience as well. I have a question. Please do share. Mona, thank you so much for raising your hand. Let me promote you to the stage. And you should be on in a second. No, sorry, Mona. You want to try again? That didn't go through. But if anyone else has a question or comment, please do raise your hand. More than happy to take that. You have a question for Dan or myself? All right, so while waiting for any questions or comments, Klaus. Klaus, I can see you're here with us. Klaus Berkler, great colleague. Please do join, Klaus. Love to get your point of view on this. Saram, let me promote you to the stage. All right, Saram, you're on.
Thanks a lot, Summer. So recently I got promoted to STEM ambassador in my school as a leader. And on that, I was asked to work on some AI societies and generally bring about more awareness on AI, generative AI and all these things. Now, I've done a research project on AI, which is on something similar to Lucy based in medicine. And Lucy sounds incredible and sounds like something that would really help change the schooling system, but also the medical system. So my main two questions would be, firstly, for a STEM ambassador leader like myself, what advice would you have for me making an AI society? But specifically to this, how would Lucy be changed when the environment is more school-based or more public-based instead of private? For example, when working in a healthcare environment with the NHS or maybe with a specific school, how would you need to change the way Lucy works, or is Lucy universal?
A great question. Let me take the first part, and then Dan, if you'd like to pick up on the Lucy angle. Just from the point of view of building a society and a network, well, you're already on LinkedIn. You're doing the right thing, right? Talking to industry experts. So kudos to you. Great to have you with us, and I think it really shows the reach of social media. But absolutely, I think this outreach is exceedingly important, and your generation of new entrepreneurs and fresh young perspectives really help bring that to the fore. So do what you're doing and reach out, and more than happy, for example, if you'd like to reach out to me after this event for content or whatever it may be, I'm happy to connect you with the right people or share anything that I have. But the important thing is to have something that's always of interest to your stakeholders, and whether that's from a career perspective, training or skills or so on. There's many different angles you can explore. More than happy to work with you on that. Dan, just to hand back to you then to get your perspective. And as Saram was describing there, the NHS, the National Health Service in the UK, is a universal health provider, the government health provider, which has a vast amount of data. I actually worked on NHS projects back in the day. It is one of the world's largest troves of medical information. I think the world's largest, in fact, because the records go back to the early 1940s. So there's a vast amount of information there, and if you take that across the entire network of patients and hospitals and so on and so forth, if you take the life sciences and healthcare angle, Dan, is that something that Lucy, for example, will be able to help with?
So let me. So the short answer is yes, but let me share more. First of all, I want to encourage. We need people to understand and be able to use and leverage this technology. So the education system shouldn't shun AI and shouldn't push out GPT. We need people to understand that the skill now is going to be the ability to leverage this. And again, we used to train people to do the research, research being going to the library, looking up in books. Then the internet came along, and the encyclopedia went by the wayside. Similarly, GPT is going to be a tool that everybody needs to know and understand and be able to use in the future. And so it's really important that the schools figure out and adopt how to use that inside of the constraints of, you still need to be able to write, you still need to be able to read, you still need to be able to consume those things, but you don't need to necessarily go find everything in the same light. As you look at how Lucy applies, first of all, to the generic public sector or a school or anything, Lucy as is just works. There's less security requirements. When I say security, most of the sources in the public sector are public sources. Therefore, we don't have to spend a lot of time filtering it by who can see what, though you still may have an administrator view or some other context. As we jump into life sciences and healthcare and other services, it's really interesting. And one of the things that Lucy does is has, trainable models. And so each Lucy ends up being different. And so as an example, we have a client who's very focused on pharmaceuticals and disease states. And so to do that, we had to create or add some components into Lucy so that she understood both of those things and how they interacted. And so in that instance of Lucy, we have created a ground truth that includes the concepts of disease states, right? And in a generic out of the box version of Lucy, we don't include disease states because it's just not relevant to most people. And so one of the empowerments is that we can make each Lucy do exactly what a user needs. And so it's just a little bit of tweaking. We can upload content, and just like every organization has its own vocabulary or different words and different acronyms and other things that have to be imported or included in the training. We do the same things around whatever knowledge sets may be differentiating. And so it would be a great effort or an easy effort, but a great outcome to attack NHS or something which with so much content available, and try to understand or learn or draw knowledge out from those repositories.
Thanks a lot, Dan. That really does answer the question.
Perfect. And thank you. And Saram, if you have any future questions or comments, to reach out to us. More than happy to help you. Karina, welcome back to the Strategy Remix.
Hi, Sama. Hi, Dan. It's very interesting topic that you discussed today, actually, on AI. I'm tapping on my end just the last couple of weeks into rather the applied AI. As I understand, there are certain differences there. And we at SAP Labs Munich, we have an engagement with the Technical University of Munich in regard of research activities and so on. And there was sort of like currently a project running with the technical universities and the other 3 universities in Munich with master students on forming or discussing a challenge on AI transformation and certain aspects regarding sustainability, and how AI and maybe other technology, but the focus was much more on AI, can trigger sustainability, environmental aspects, social aspects, and so on. So the challenge that I worked with, and I learned a lot from student side, so I think collaboration is key here as well, of like understanding how we can use technology such as AI in that context of driving the momentum also for circularity further forward. We did that in an aspect of that it is a tool that can be employed maybe with our software or with other software or in its own, of like helping the fashion industry, driving maybe the customer engagement in terms of services, also with regard to education on certain points, also in aspects of decision making once fashion in specific fashion aspect waste is being returned, so it doesn't land on landfill. My question would be, since I'm intrigued by the aspect of AI technology, how do you see in your point of view how you see that with regard to sustainability, how Lucy or the AI in general can sort of like trigger sustainability aspects? And obviously I'm much more interested in the environmental aspect of sustainability. What do you think? What are your thoughts on that point?
The first answer is awesome, and that we need to, obviously we need work on the environment, and we need to help in any way possible. And I'm going to share a client story. When I do that, know that this is actually a published, there's a press release and published content on this, so I'm not disclosing anything that's inappropriate. But there's a European-based environmental consulting agency called ERM, and ERM.com. And so their consultants, and we'll call it 100% of the organization, uses Lucy to enable all of the knowledge that's created across all of their projects in different places to be able to bring forward the right solutions for their clients. So it's a direct connection to the environmental world, but in their case, it's their internal knowledge and specific to their capability of delivering that environmental or those environmental solutions to their client base. Lucy, again, is about enabling the knowledge that exists and bringing it forward. And we do things in fashion and retailing. We have trends for some other brands. We have fashion, color, texture, all kinds of trending information that helps them build and meet their needs in the future of fashion too. So we're doing this across all these different enterprises and places. Where we don't do as much as I'd like to do is in the universities, because again, just think about all the PhD papers, all of the content, all of the information that has been created in these universities that are not being leveraged, in the university, but also not being leveraged enough by the funding organizations external to the university that could be taking advantage of that. And I think it's a really unbelievably cool use case to be able to say, hey, let's take that that PhD knowledge that's been created and make it available to other places where they can help, again, environmentally save the world.
Dan, I wanted to add, when we met last time virtually, we talked about a consumer product scenario where you had a client who was trying to find, for example, packaging designs, right, sustainable packaging designs. And that's one example. So consumer products industry, a very large, diversified consumer products business, has huge pockets of knowledge spread across the entire organization, right, from product design, recipe management, packaging, distribution, supply chain, procurement, etc. And sustainability is part and parcel of every element of that, right? Are you picking the right packaging design? Are you procuring the right sort of packaging that goes into that? Is it being distributed the right way, and so on? Would you like to touch on that and those sorts of scenarios in terms of how access to that knowledge can help drive sustainability?
Absolutely, and again, a public use case of Lucy is PepsiCo, and from a global perspective, Lucy's rolled out in 25, 30 different countries, multilingual, and so they're tracking inside their organization, and actually they call Lucy their ADA. So you can actually Google PepsiCo ADA and read about their business use case. Matter of fact, Stefan Gans, the head of the research and insights group, published on LinkedIn both his vision for ADA and then a year later a performance review of ADA. So I encourage you to look at that. But they're doing exactly what we're talking about, both from a product development and product perspective, tastes and ingredients and trends and those kinds of things, but also from packaging and environmental efforts and HR, and I mean, across the board, how do people make the right decisions in their organization? If we want to just focus on, hey, what does packaging look like in the future? That's a first of all, very simple question to ask, Lucy. What are the trends in packaging for consumer bottles, for paper versus plastic, whatever you want to ask? That's the type of content that's being brought forward to all of the tens of thousands of people at Pepsi that use ADA or Lucy.
Yes, and I think you couldn't have a more powerful affirmation of how the technology can be used in such a large and diversified organization across multiple countries, multiple jurisdictions, multiple sources of information, which isn't necessarily always accessible from a single corporate database or intranet. Karina, you had a follow-up? let me promote you.
Just a comment on what Dan expressed on using PhD research. Since I'm also a PhD researcher, I found the way that you formulated it of like using really the understanding of what research tells us, and that it being used in a very for industry and everything. I like your angle. Given the aspect that is, I'm an own researcher, so I know obviously what you need to cope with in that aspect. It's intellectual property, and a PhD thesis is or should be turned into, let's say, 2, 3, or even maybe 4 paper. Once that is done, obviously the knowledge it can be then like shared and is being used and so on, and that may be a very interesting angle. But so far, the system itself is sort of very stuck, and obviously once you're going more an academic way, the PhD itself needs to be included in a paper format, because this is the way you as an academic are mostly counted on. So this gives a little bit tricky aspect to it, but I like your comment, because I think this is really the value out of what research should be doing, and the contribution to industry and to practice. So I really like your comment, but given the aspect that I know what's on the other side, it's a little bit tricky to go there forward. But I would like to explore that more on a 101 then, if you are interested on these things. Thank you.
Well, certainly interested in exploring anything. The one thing that we need to differentiate, because when people talk about GPT, sorry, everyone thinks Chat GPT, right? And your mind goes right to Chat GPT and what it does and how it does it. And Lucy's substantially different in that we don't look at the internet at all, being the first answer. We look at internal data. The second thing is we don't use all of the data to create the answer. We find the answers and then create the answer, the single answer. And by doing that, we also know exactly the inputs that went into that answer, and we can share them or display them with you. And so one example would be if you're getting an answer and we could flag that and say, hey, this has some proprietary IP in it. And so if you're going to use it, you need to either reference it or license it or do something. So there are ways that are very different than that Chat GPT world where you're just getting an answer from the internet and you don't know where the sources are and what they are and what they mean. We know specifically the sources that went into this answer, and we share that with the user.
Yeah, it's a very powerful statement, Dan. I think this is what I felt originally when, a year ago, this started to kick off the discussion about, Chat GPT and other, consumer-facing products like this. People say, it hallucinates things, it's making errors and so on. But I think the general public or journalists fail to understand the actual ingestion of data and how that works, and large language models. And those concepts I don't think were fully understood. And then there's this whole sort of hype in the media, both positive and negative. What will generative AI bring? But my response to that was exactly as you described it. I mean, if you're pointing it at the corpus of your own information that you know and have control over and is validated, using this technology to explore that and generate insight for you is extremely powerful and also reliable. But like any other database, this rule has always been the case, right? Garbage in, garbage out. But of course, anything that's gone into your knowledge database hopefully has already gone to that validation. But that does then beg the question, have you seen the role of the librarian, as you mentioned earlier, evolve with customers who are using Lucy then? Is there kind of an evolution of that in terms of managing that information that's going into that? Or is there a role for someone inside the organization to manage that process?
It's interesting that my sister's a librarian. I want to start with that. The librarian, the function of the librarian is changing, and she's actually at a college so a college librarian. And part of what she's doing is facilitating for the students how to find and do and research. So in her case, it's transforming into how to leverage and learn and use GPT for the student advantage, but also ensuring that it's their work and that they, edit and create the actual output, no matter what the system is. Inside a corporation, we had research librarians, and I go back again to 3M. There was a department of research librarians. They had subscriptions that we had 10 seats to this data source, 10 seats to that data source, and so we still have the situation where some of the data that's available in an organization is only available to a subset of the people because of how the data is licensed, and so one of two problems or two solutions is you have a librarian or somebody doing the research that has access to those increased data sources, or as we're licensing data sources, these organizations figure out that a site license is a better answer, more value, and they can probably increase the revenue, but they can't charge the same rate as they did for the 10 seats for 10,000 seats. There's so much data available, and it's, again, how it's used and who has access to it. And again, contracted data, Lucy enforces those contracts, so only the contracted number of users have that data or those answers available. So you might have to send something to the research librarians to do some work to get you some answers that you don't have access to.
Right, so that's a great insight, Dan. I'm quite impressed by that. When I was working in a CIA role, for example, often I had to take subscriptions with various industry analysts. I'm sure you know who they are, and they provide CIOs all sorts of rating information on various products and insight papers. But the access to that is driven by number of seats, and that also becomes a sort of how can I say, a leverage perhaps over others in the organization. You have access to this and you have access to that. But as you say, those commercial limitations can be respected in the right way, but also the insight that comes out of that can also be democratized, right? That's also a powerful statement. Knowledge is effectively unleashed. We have another question. Amanda, let me promote you to the stage. All right, Amanda, you're on. Please unmute yourself. Yes.
Can you hear me? Perfect. Thank you. Yes, just a quick observation as a person who is now in ed tech as a solutions consultant, but several careers ago was a university librarian. I really appreciate the analogy here between the work that people are still doing in libraries, and I feel like it's highly applicable to the corporate world in that, our goal is really to help learners try to move beyond the finding stage of information and focusing more on their end product, the papers that they need to produce, and get into more of the process. Like you were saying, extracting context, extracting knowledge from the information they have. So I'm really excited about applications in both the corporate world and in higher ed with this kind of technology. I think it's going to get us closer to critical thinking across the board than we've probably been before. But my question is, thinking on that topic, and as you're talking about licensing of all these sources of intellectual property, has Lucy, or have you heard in the AI industry, begun to seek out partnerships with, those companies that hold all of that data from professional research? And what do you see the future there being in terms of partnerships, or is it more on each company who's licensing that information?
So there's a couple answers to this question. We're open to everything and want everything to be available inside Lucy. Most of the data companies that have this, the source, kind of the sources of this data, have been open to the and actually understand what they're selling. let me just be clear. Data providers sell the data, the knowledge, the information they have, and they have created systems to access it. And so some think that the system is their value add, but it's not the system, it's the data that people are paying for. And so when we demonstrate Lucy and show that to them, and they start to understand that what really happens is their data is used much more often, because when you're in an organization or you're in the library or wherever that knowledge exists, you have to go to each of those systems independently. So I have to know the login information. I have to know how to make a query in that solution, and I have to actually do that. And so the fact that we have places that where Lucy's connected, they'll call it to over 1,000 different connections. And with a single query, you're querying, in effect, all of those 1,000 different sources. And in seconds, getting answers from many of them. And when I say many of them, Lucy selects which are the most important, best answers. She doesn't present 1,000. She presents the top 10. And so you don't always see the answer, but it was in the consideration, and those can be part of the generative response at a broader level. So yes, we're there, and we are talking and working with even some of the tools that are, most libraries have a consolidated data source that they're actually licensing all their data from. And we too are working with the same sources and for our clients, but Lucy doesn't come with any of those data sources. We just come with connectors to those data sources, if that makes sense. It's your license that we're using to input the data.
Yes, thank you, Dan. I think that's very clear. I hope, Amanda, that answered your question. Simon.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. Dan, I'm wondering, in a world with generative AI-driven co-pilots, how is Lucy's role going to change from librarian to assistant in the future, or is it?
Actually, I really appreciate, Simon, that question, because we're doing a whole bunch of things with the generative model and co-pilots specifically, but co-pilots are that's a Microsoft product, but also a whole set of concepts. But inside Copilot, let's say you're using Copilot in Microsoft Word, and you want to ask some questions of your knowledge base. Lucy will be connected in that model, and we really think it's a garbage in, garbage out, which Samar referred to earlier, where I don't want just any information coming into my research. I want to understand where it came from, have some concepts of what it looks like, and that it's valid before it becomes part of my output. And so Lucy will be the garbage in eliminator and the specific knowledge sets creator. So we have clients who are doing very specific things. Give an example, writing job descriptions. Well, we don't want an internet full of knowledge and job descriptions, and we might not even want our entire database of knowledge descriptions coming in. And so we're going to be able to use Lucy in that process of filtering and creating and bringing forward the right set of inputs to go into that Copilot world. And again, we see that as a very important part of that, of what's coming next, and we're there. It's just we're waiting for Copilot to be available to the general public.
Thanks.
All right. So most welcome, Simon. I hope that answered your question of some very exciting developments coming down the track. So Dan, in the last 5 minutes, time flew by. So any other questions or comments, do raise your hand. More than happy to take those in the last couple of minutes. But just before we do, Dan, I know you started to explain this, but could you touch upon the benefit of working with SAP IO and how that's helping your clients understand and access the value of Lucy?
Well, again, SAP IO is kind of for companies on the entrepreneurial journey doing innovations, but really at a corporate level, at a for working for real companies doing real things. And so from our company perspective, it gives us technical resources and access. It gives us a sales channel and opportunity to, even come into these organizations at the right level and having the right conversations. But importantly, what does it do for our clients? And so while we were and have been integrated to some components inside the SAP environment, SAP Marketing Cloud, initially because SAP is a client and has been for quite some time, it has opened up kind of a broader set of applications and helped us be integrated and ready to be integrated inside this broader view of what SAP looks like. And again, we talk about Sales and Service Cloud, Success Factors, which is the HR tool set. And one of the things that we do inside Lucy often is who is the expert on a certain topic area inside my company. So I can find the documents, but I can also find the people. Connecting to the likes of Success Factors are enabling inside an organization, because sometimes the expert's as important as the answer or document if it's an undocumented future that was there. And so we're really, really excited about it. We're kicking off. We're done with the integration phase. Lucy will be in the SAP store next month, and as we do that, it's very easy for SAP clients to transact with Lucy too, because the transaction goes through SAP, lightening the process quite a bit.
Right, exactly, and that's why I look forward to working with you, Dan, and keen to extend our professional collaboration with SAP Industry Cloud. But just as we come to wrap up, if there's any other questions or comments, do raise your hand. I'll be closing in the next 2 minutes. Shweta, great to have you back. Let me promote you to the stage.
Hi, Summer. Hi, Dan. So I think this is really interesting, and I think not just from a business perspective for the insights, but as a comms professional, I've just been thinking through that this is brilliant, because this gives out so much of insights that it even enables and empowers the marketing and communications to drive insights and messages in a different way forward, purely to.
I think you're muted again.
Yeah, sorry, Shweta, we lost you there. No, lost Shweta. Let me put her back. This is the joy of live social audio. All right, Shweta, you're back on. Yes.
Am I audible now? Okay, so I was just saying, I think this is brilliant from an insight point of view, and I've been thinking through it from purely a marketing and comms perspective, that it takes you out in a bigger space, because you're able to draw these insights from a business, like these are business purely insights from the business itself and not the internet like otherwise, which enables us to drive the conversations with the customers, with stakeholders in a very different way. So I think this is brilliant for not just business specialists or sales, but even the larger community.
Yes, I couldn't agree more, Shweta, and I'm glad we've been able to communicate that in the last 45 minutes to an hour, in terms of the key benefit there, right? You're unleashing that knowledge inside the organization and making it available. You're democratizing those insights to drive better decisions. So thank you so much, Shweta. And if you have any questions or comments after, I'm more than happy to pick those up. But as we look to wrap up now, we're coming to the top of the hour. Dan, very briefly, what's next for Lucy?
Well, the greatest part, I the real next step is this Copilot enablement of more GPT that we're talking about. There's also enabling the world of what people don't understand about chatbots. We'll say it that way. Is what really happens inside corporate chat or chatbots is they're programmed kind of answers, and so you might be your chatbot might be programmed by people to answer 100 questions, 1,000 questions, 5,000 questions, 10,000 questions, and there's still a purpose in having a programmed answer. But we believe that augmented with Lucy, you might be able to reduce the number of answers that you're programming to just a few hundred, whatever it may be, and then the rest can go to Lucy, because Lucy can handle n number of questions. But again, there's still reason to have a programmed answer, an official answer. But in general, people just want to provide answers, and so there's a lot of opportunity inside that space. HR, companies learning. So it's an expansion of use cases, it's an expansion of data sources, and it's enabling more of that new next GPT world. We have a whole bunch of security elements, other things coming, and we just encourage you guys to reach out, Lucy.AI, and we'd love to have conversations and talk about potential use cases.
Awesome. Very exciting future. Looking forward to working with you, Dan, on taking this forward from an SAP perspective and to any client. So if you have any further questions or comments about Lucy.AI, please reach out to Dan and visit the website and find out more. So with that, I'd like to thank Dan so kindly for spending more than a full hour with us today. I hope you found this interesting and informative. And stay tuned for further editions of the Strategy Remix. All right, so with that, thank you once again, and I will play the outro.
You have been listening to the Strategy Remix with Sammar Faruqi. Many thanks to our panel for taking the time to join, and to you for your kind participation. Look out for the recording of this session on LinkedIn and YouTube. If you would like to be a future panelist, have an idea for a topic, or any follow-up questions, please drop a LinkedIn DM to Sammar. Remember, you cannot predict the future, but you can help make it. Start today with the Strategy Remix. Don't forget to connect or follow Sammar. Thanks again, and see you soon. Goodbye for now.